that is the one spot where there's enough Chinese and Koreans and other Asians in one spot that they can actually survive the gerrymanders that political, every 10 years, every census, you get a throw at redistricting on the state senate side, on the assembly side, on the congressional side. You redistrict this. You know, Joe's quite aware of this because he served as a special master for the courts in one of these little excursions in redistricting. I had a small map here that had the congressional districts in the city of New York. You can't quite see them, but if you could, you'd realize nothing looks like any geography that any of us know. They have fingers and tails, and they wind. One of them winds through 3 boroughs, which elects a Hispanic woman. They took in sections of Williamsburg and sections of
Congresswoman Velasquez. Nydia Velasquez.
Yes, Nydia Velasquez. It's a tripartite Puerto Rican, essentially. The base of it's Puerto Rican district, but it's got Dominicans and others in it. But if you look at a map of Asians in New York, and Chinese are always 50% at least of the Asian population throughout New York and throughout New York history. It's going down. It's 46%, I think now. Last time I looked, the Asians are intertwined with what essentially are European districts: Irish, German, Italian, Jewish districts. So they never have enough people on their own outside of Flushing to elect somebody sort of automatically. They really would have to campaign against a candidate who represents one of the other groups, or more of sometimes 2 and 3 parts of the other group, like a Pataki, if you will, who had so many different ancestries that he could claim to be anything from Hungarian to Irish to heaven knows what else, and be right. And they don't have enough clout in any one area geographically. They'd have to get a district that was actually drawn like this. The last thing a person drawing redistricting does is draw a district that looks like this. They look like fingers, tails, wings. They go in and out and up and down, but they never look. That's the state senate 6, and you can see that. Some of the darker areas.
I'm embarrassed, but this was done by the Republicans 9 years ago.
That's right.
The Democrats will do it.
Democrats will redistrict this time. That's right. But so there's no way as of yet that I think an Asian could get elected in the city on the strength of his own Asian population. He or she would have to appeal strongly across the board.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Vardy. And now we're open.
Yeah, please.
I had told our speakers we will end this forum at 6:15, and even though some of the students who had 6 o'clock classes wanted to stay, I told them they had to leave. So that we have now the students and some faculty and community leaders who didn't have to leave at 6. We're going to go to 6:15, which is about 15 minutes from now. Questions? Yes.
Just an observation. The question was asked about people who are serving as elected officials and so forth. I don't think we can really even answer that. But there's another situation that troubles me even more. If you look at the services that we have here in the city, police, fire, and so forth, you do not see the kinds of people we're talking about going for those kinds of, how many Chinese firemen do we have? Policemen and so forth, which is quite different than the people who came here from Europe after 1900. You look at the police department, primarily Irish, some Italian. Fire department, the same thing, sanitation. They seem to have a need to get into some sort of government services. I don't see that, and I don't know if there's an answer to that, but I think that's even more of a question than getting elected to office. However, the point that I wanted to make was that for those of us that are educators, my class are here, they're going to be teachers and so forth, what you said has a greater impact upon what we do, because we see a transition in and out of the classroom during the school year. In one school, PS 57, 65% migration in and out in 1 year. You can imagine what a problem that is to teachers to try and maintain some sort of a sense of curriculum in the area. So that's a problem. I also think that when we talk about the people who are coming in, if they do serve in government, let's say they become people who make laws that affect education, what does that do to the curriculum in the future? What are our teachers going to have to deal with if we see a larger percentage of people in government, of course? And that's, I think, where a lot of my students are feeling and why most of them came. And I think your explanation, Dr. Salvo, was good, but we have those kinds of questions that we have to deal with. For instance, in special education, if you're going to put someone in special education, they have to have an evaluation. It has to be done in their dominant or native language. So where do you find people who speak Urdu and Twi and so forth and so on? There, I think, is where the people in the education department have a great problem, and I hope that maybe you can share that with some of your colleagues back in city government, because it really is a problem that's going to get even larger.
Well, Dr. DeLuca is a professor at Wagner and a former principal of public school of the New York City Board of Education. Dr. Salvo?
I can tell you about my experience of the past 6 or 7 months. You know, the Mayor Bloomberg has a new executive order. The executive order essentially says that city agencies need to make a reasonable effort to provide services in languages other than English. And the analysis that we're doing, I've given already probably 4 or 5 presentations on the data and on the material that will serve not only as a backdrop for what languages are primary, so to speak. I didn't show you the list. There are 1.8 million people who speak a language other than English and have problems with English. Half of those, over 900,000, Spanish is the primary language, but there are 4 or 5 major groups under that also have English language issues. So the mayor, in the interest of public safety and in the interest of getting people involved, you know, there are a lot of people who turn around and say, well, what are we doing? Well, the answer is getting people involved in the workings and business of New York, getting people, accommodating people, making services available so they become part of New York. And in essence, I have been working with the agencies and with the providers to create a system that will allow agencies to make a reasonable accommodation. So the city of New York is putting forth an effort to recognizing that we have all these people who need help and helping provide them with services. So that should make, to some degree, the job of service providers outside of city agencies make their jobs a bit easier. But I will not kid you, the challenge that I talk about a lot, we have a dynamic city that is quite vital. On the flip side of that, there's a whole bunch of challenges that we face day to day on how to deal with this. It's true. And if you have constant flows in and out, people going in and out of the classroom, what does it do for teachers who may have been raised in a curriculum where when you say those kids are being passed through, and then those kids who are in 1st grade, the odds of them getting to 7th grade in the same school, for a standpoint of a principal, that is one heck of a situation. You know, number of kids who have different places and so on where they go to school. That is a big challenge, and I'm not going to kid you. I don't have the answer for that. I'm not in that area of education, but it is one heck of an issue. But the flip side is, look at what we gain from all this. If we successfully get people to buy into New York, so to speak, and become parts of this city, like my parents were both born in Italy. My father came here, the story that you hear, it's the same story you'll hear about a Korean or a Chinese immigrant today. My father was Italian, he came in, worked, started his own business. It's the motivations, the migration patterns, as Frank pointed out, all stay the same. It's just the faces are different, the countries are different. The motivation's the same. We benefited in the past, and we hope to try to do something to continue to benefit. But there are so many fronts where there are challenges, which is why we have to have good people in government. By the way, I didn't make my pitch. Government's really a good place to work. And it's not because of what's happened to the private sector, okay? Before this whole thing happened with the private sector, I would tell you, I've worked for government for 25 years, and my job is as exciting or better than it was when I first started. And there are a lot of people like me.